There's a big difference between talking and reporting, especially right now with a fire hose worth of news coming your way. You know what helps? Having reporters in the field. I'm Brad Milkey from ABC News, and that's what we've got on ABC's daily podcast, Start Here. Every morning, Start Here takes you across the country and around the world for a quick, smart look at the stories that matter. It's fast, it's straightforward, and sometimes, gasp, news can even be fun. So let's meet up tomorrow morning. Listen to Start Here wherever you get your podcasts.
Today on CityCast Boise, revisiting our interview with the mayor, the Union Block building downtown is really going through it, and finally, a push to preserve Boise's music history. Executive producer Frankie Barnhill is here to walk me through everything. It's Friday, February 2nd. I'm Nick Kwa, and this is what Boise's talking about. Happy end of the week, Frankie. How you doing?
Happy Friday. I'm good. I mean, Boise, what the hell with this weather this week, though, right? I mean, I think it was bikini weather on Wednesday. I don't know.
Yes. I was a little disappointed. I tried to sort of skip out of work early and go for a drink outdoors or something, but the clouds came back by 4 o'clock.
You were foiled. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. My understanding is that there was some record breaking happening this week. Is that what you found?
Yeah, and it was 66 degrees on Wednesday, I think and it was a record compared to some date in the 50s. But the biggest thing to me is just looking back at January and February, we're here, is the month of extremes, right? More than 20 inches of snow that one week, and then well below freezing temps. And then all of a sudden this past week, Boise, bikini weather once again.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I don't want to do the thing where it's the top of every conversation is about the weather, but seriously, this feels this is a very big story. I don't know.
Well,
it feels like we're accumulating debt for the summer a little bit.
For sure. And let's not get into climate anxiety territory because that's obviously where I want to go all the time. But it's a little interesting. I did look up snowpack because I just wanted to see. And for the region, we are below normal, but not as bad as other years. So
that is what I've heard, which is a little surprising to hear. Yeah,
that big snow, helped a little bit, but we're still below normal overall. The Boise Basin specifically is around 80% of normal. So it's much worse the further north you go. So North Idaho's looking rough for sure.
Man, wow. Well, in any case, it seems like we're back to kind of gloom and doom at this corner of the week. And, I hope you listening out there that you managed to get a run out in the sun at some point.
Yes.
So let's go into the first thing I want to talk about. I listened in on the interview that that you and Blake had with the mayor earlier this week. That was your first sit down, the mayor's first sit down on CityCast Boise?
Yes, we were so excited, and we had so many questions. It was our longest episode ever because we just had so much we wanted to cover with her. I mean, obviously looking back at the election results, but really we were like, what's next? Let's look to the future. What are you really going to do with this, 55% voters behind you? Now what? And these different things that she's been focusing on for years, but okay, what's the 2024 version of that, of housing, of climate change work, of, initiatives around parks and libraries and stuff. So we covered a lot.
It's 55% of voters plus just basically the clean sweep of the city council for overall the slate. And so, my understanding of the mayor's first term was that it was defined in large part by the pandemic, and now we don't have that, hopefully.
Nope.
And so it's really interesting to think about the next 4 years because we are, it feels like we are much like the rest of the country and if not the world, in various forms of overlapping crises. And you and Blake did cover a lot of ground in the interview. But could you walk me through the main beats that stood out to you from that conversation?
Yeah, I do want to say one of the things that really stands out that Blake asked the mayor about that was a really good question. So, this whole tension between obviously blue dot and the Red Sea of Idaho, the tension between the city and the state around culture war issues, around all kinds of topics. One of the things that Blake asked about was, the mayor put forth a resolution and the city council passed it after Roe v. Wade fell to basically deprioritize investigation and enforcement of the abortion bans. So basically, BPD is not going to be out there prioritizing this in some big way. So Blake asked, another culture war law passed by the Republicans at the State House was the ban on gender-affirming care for minors from last year. It's held up in court right now. It's not in place at the moment. But, it also targets doctors and providers, similar to the abortion laws or some of them, abortion bans. And so Blake asked, what about this one? Would you maybe, consider deprioritizing enforcement of this if it goes into effect? And yeah, she kind of stopped and said, I'm so glad you asked this question. And she seemed like genuinely curious and also a little bit like surprised maybe, or just like, oh, I'm really thinking about this in the moment. And she said that, quote, it's not like a topic that residents have brought to me, but that she's going to think about it. So that was interesting.
And it is sort of a slowly escalating issue in a sense, because I believe that's another bill moving through state legislation it's moving to quote unquote define the sexes. And again, it is like just this sort of red meat on the fire kind of move from the other Republican Party. And so it feels like that it kind of raises all these questions about the city's position and the city's means to kind of protect itself and it basically define itself in contrast to the state a little bit. And so
Totally.
I'm glad Blake asked that question.
Yeah, and we lingered just in general on what is the relationship between the city and the state? It's not good on a lot of levels. I think that so we're going to keep following that and ask her what she thinks about this issue in a few months, and especially as that court case is pending. But yeah, that bill in the House, just to note the one that you're mentioning, where basically it's like, I don't know, are they into linguistics now? I don't get it. Anyways, they're trying to define this, and in all seriousness, it's like kind of erasure of non-binary and trans folks because of this question of sex and gender, it's the same thing. No, it's not. And yeah, of all I think 15 people I read in Idaho Capitol Sun testified on the bill. They were all against it in the public hearing, and Republicans passed it out of committee, goes to the full House. So another issue that Boiseans, have strong feelings about, and largely, I think in opposition to something like this.
Is there anything else that stood out to you from that conversation? I mean, we talked a lot under the new zoning policy and housing affordability, and also sort of interested the fact that, it's the biggest story for the city right now. Yeah,
you've pointed this out, the zoning code rewrite, that it's now a few months in. And so we were kind of like, okay, it's still early, we get it. But what has changed? What is changing? What about this zoning code that's supposed to really, hopefully, make housing more affordable for everyone? What can we point to already and see it's working, or it could be working? And, she, mentioned, of course, it's the market-based approach, right? And so, creating the opportunities for developers to submit plans for denser housing. She did say, though, that there have been kind of this pent-up demand once the zoning code was put in place. Now there is some new energy in the development tracker that is a public website, by the way. Anybody can look this up, of development plans that have been put forth. So they have to go through multiple steps. Things haven't been approved, but we were talking about some different examples. And one she threw out was this application for this spot on 13th Street, right across from Camel's Back, basically.
The good old North End.
Exactly, good old North End. And it would be ground floor, like a cafe or coffee shop or something. And then above floor would be apartments. And it's oh, that sounds so great. That's so cool. And then it's well, it's in the North End, though. All these, how do we get this to happen in West Boise, or, in the far ends of the bench? Is there appetite for it? Those are kind of questions that, we want to keep chewing on and looking at as these things come through.
Gosh, and North End is becoming its own little city in some ways. It's every time I go up there, it's wow, it feels so different out here compared to the rest of the city.
Totally. Yep.
Yeah, and of course, it's important to contextualize like there are systems upon systems at play here. Neighborhood associations play a huge role. North End has a particularly strong one up there, and so yeah, the development tracker is such a great resource because if you are if you care about housing affordability and how things are moving in terms of development and opening up new space for residential and commercial sort of opportunities, you should pay some attention to that development tracker. It's kind of fun to kind of sift through and think through sometimes too.
Totally. Yeah, we'll throw it in the show notes for this, but it definitely, and yeah, go listen to the full conversation with Mayor McLean. There was a lot in there. We are already working on scheduling her for another chat sometime in the next few months. We had a great time talking with her and asking her tough questions, and she seemed to enjoy it too. So we hope to keep the conversation going.
One more question before we move on from this. Were there any kind of threads or beats or questions that you're hoping to find out more about, but for whatever we couldn't?
Yeah, I mean, one big topic we didn't exclusively talk about was climate change and checking in on her big goals and strategies around that.
Carbon neutral by 2050, I believe that's the big sign downtown.
Yep, exactly. 2050, it's coming around the corner, I think, truly. So I think that just really drilling down on that a little bit more. And then we are going to do kind of a little bit of an exclusive in our Hey Boise newsletter sometime soon. We did talk with her briefly, but had to cut it for time in our podcast. Once again, it was the longest episode we've ever published about walkability, especially when it comes to parks, that this is a big goal of hers, to have every kid in the city be able to walk safely, keyword, to a park within 10 minutes is the big goal. So talking about these big stretch goals and how to actually get there, I want to fill in the gaps there a little bit more.
Yeah, we do love parks.
Yes, we do.
Shipping can make or break a sale, so optimize how you ship your orders with ShipStation. They make it easy to automate and manage orders no matter how big your business grows. And they might even be able to help reduce shipping and warehouse costs. So optimize and keep up your momentum for growth with ShipStation. Sign up for your free 60-day trial now at ShipStation.com and use the code POD. That's ShipStation.com with the code POD.
This episode is brought to you by JLL. Get an insider view into the world of commercial real estate with JLL's podcast, Trends and Insights, the Future of Commercial Real Estate. Whether you're curious about making cities more sustainable, the evolution of office space, or AI opportunities, this podcast will help keep you a step ahead. Tune in for candid conversations with business leaders about the biggest trends impacting how we live, work, and play. Subscribe to Trends and Insights now at jll.com/podcast.
Alrighty, so another story that caught my eye this week is a story about the Union Block building downtown being condemned. There's now a huge row, as the British people would say, between the building owner, Ken Howell, and the city over that classification of it being condemned. Frankie, what's the story here?
The latest news is that this week, when the city council met, they unanimously decided to keep the Union Block building on Main Street closed, denying the appeal from owner Ken Howell, as you said. But yeah, this is just the latest iteration. And folks, might best know this building is where Moon's Kitchen Diner was, Mai Tai was. It's also where the Rose Room was. So if you were around in 2015, 2016, 2017, I think is when it switched over to Balsam Brands, that was where a lot of shows happened. And I have this memory of a very raucous magic sword show at Treefort in 2015 that kind of makes my palms sweaty thinking about it. Now I'm reading about these stories. But anyway, but really it was 2018 when the building switched, when Ken Howell and developers looked into excavating the basement to build it out more. And so this is a building that was built in 1902. It's one of Boise's oldest buildings. And so there was, all these supportive structures, whatever, keeping the building structurally sound while they were doing this excavation work. And it seems like that's what the city is mostly focused on, these structural concerns after years of this excavation in the basement to build this new area out.
Yeah, and 2018 was when it started. I remember first hearing about it around 2019 when I think it was a story about two people on an e-scooter fell into a hole in the alley behind the building. Yeah, and then they later filed a claim against ACHD and the city. And it's just sort of, and I suppose the pandemic kind of dragged that process out a little bit. It feels like a very difficult situation.
Totally. Yeah, very difficult. And I just think about Boise in general and downtown. There are historic buildings in downtown, absolutely. But I think as compared, this is tough, but as compared to other similarly sized cities, I feel like ones I visited, it's a little bit less. And I feel like that speaks to how difficult it is to find uses for old buildings, to maintain maintain them, to update them. It's on the historic register of places, the Union Block building. And so many buildings in downtown were neglected for decades, like the 70s, the 80s. You know, downtown was like a ghost town, as I understand it. I wasn't around then, but that's how I understand it. And, you know, when now in the last couple decades, obviously there's been this focus on bringing things back to downtown and having this major revitalization. But I don't know. I feel like the Union Block building might be kind of an example of like how challenging this is. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you got to tie together the story of the growth of the city, right? Like,
Totally.
Even when I first started coming to Boise with my wife, who's from here, downtown, it was just super quiet and a little scary sometimes when I walk around as a person of color back then. And so I think in particular, you know, I think we sort of broadly know the sort of general strokes of the story, and like the pandemic caused a lot of inflow migration for a multitude of reasons. And suddenly, I think in a blink of an eye, you know, you had to start asking a question about downtown, like, is there parking?
Right.
Or do you want to go out for dinner? Which is not a question people used to ask 5 years ago.
And do I need a reservation to get into dinner?
It turns out you do.
Yeah. More and more.
So it's interesting because, you know, I remember reading stories about these buildings, like, I think the Idaho had an elevator that simply didn't work for a couple of years.
Yes.
And that was like not as much of an issue because use wasn't that exhaustive as the sort of wear and tear of the buildings kind of experience in the wake of a lot more people just simply using them and a lot more foot traffic. Like building safety feels like the primary theme coming out of the story of any of these sort of major buildings downtown, almost in tension with the notion of historic preservation.
Yeah, safety plus use. Like, what is the modern use for this space that wasn't meant for these, you know, the kinds of things that we're using downtown buildings for these days? I do think, you know, a little bit further west of downtown, on the western side of the downtown, a little bit on Main Street, I guess, if we go down that way, I'd say the best example of how to do it right, but also how ambitious you have to be, how much you have to fight to make it happen, is the Avery building, right? Which, of course, just opened recently and is probably, I would say, is the most ambitious thing in downtown Boise that's happened. You know, taking the building that was, I think, built in 1910, so same era as Union Block building, but then went through many, many years of disuse, disrepair, the Blues Bouquet, anybody, all of that. And now it's this absolutely stunning restaurant in the front, bar in the back, and then a boutique hotel upstairs, which is kind of returning it to what it was. But, you know, we talked with one of the co-owners, Cal Elliott, who Michelin star chef, you know, a Boise guy who moved away to New York, made a big name for himself, and came back and decided this is the project. Like, everybody's telling me no, but we're going to do it. With his wife and developer, Michael Hormashea, they made it happen, but it sounded like it was there were a lot of no's along the way.
First of all, like development work, construction work, building rehabilitation, these are massive, massive, spendy infrastructure projects, right?
Yes.
So you need a lot of financial backers, you need a lot of time, you need a lot of like gumption to work through the bureaucracy, and then the sort of overlapping like processes you need in place to get in construction, to get get everything done. I, you know, tip my hat to anybody who has like the appetite for it. In particular, if you're if you're taking on like a historic building.
Exactly.
What's striking to me about this moment in time, it feels like we're in the middle of a generational change when it comes to thinking about, you know, the relationship between buildings in Boise and also the development community. Like Ken Howell's been around for a very long time, and he manages and he has preserved a lot of the other buildings, historic buildings downtown.
He's been invested in the preservation of it for a long time. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and now it feels like, you know, with the folks over at Avery, like it sounds like there is kind of new blood on the scene a little bit.
Totally. That's such a good point, Nick. Yeah, that distinction is very real, I think. And yeah, just we'll link to the longer conversation with Cal Elliott, but he just had some interesting things to say. It was fascinating, again, hearing his perspective as someone who grew up in Boise, so understands the culture, moved away, and then came back. And, you know, when he was trying to do things and was getting no's and people saying, that's not possible, he's saying, yes, it is. You guys just haven't done it before. It's definitely possible. Let's figure it out. But that attitude, it took many years for the Avery to become what it is. It's obviously still very new, so we don't know the long-term sustainability of it. But, you know, so far people have been pretty excited about it, seems.
Yeah, but somebody's got to try and somebody's got to do it.
Totally.
Speaking of preservation, how's that for a segue?
Ooh.
A little story came up from the BSC newsletter, went around. I think they send out dispatches every once in a while.
Yeah.
That caught my eye. So filed is under the category of local music preservation. So the Record Exchange, which is that our beloved institution downtown
yes.
Boise,
What an icon.
which is now being overshadowed by what looks like it's going to be the tallest building in Boise, which is very scary.
Yeah.
So they're collaborating with Boise State University's Special Collections and Archives sort of division over at the Alberts Library to basically build out an archive of the store's history and like the local / like Idaho-wide music scene. So essentially we're talking about like considering the Record Exchange as the sort of site of local music preservation. And so they're collaborating in a couple of different ways. They're hoping to highlight and preserve local music history through the lens of the Record Exchange. And I just want to shout out the person who is leading this initiative, Coralie Oxley, who is a current senior at Boise State University, an Idaho resident. I'm super excited about this project.
I know. And just how cool the Record Exchange just being this place for decades now that people have come to rely on for indie music, for, just being a place to convene and nerd out about music. And then this latest project and iteration, what a great combo. I also think, the Record Exchange fairly recently went through new ownerships. A bunch of the employees, longtime employees got together to buy it from the original
That's
owners.
right. Build out that worker co-op. Love that.
Yes, we love it. And so just how cool that they're like continuing to just find new ways to collaborate in the community around music. And I mean, you and I, we love the music scene in Boise. So there's...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I also want to flag that Oxley, I'm just reading here that she's a former employee of the Record Exchange. So
which is perfect.
Again, this sort of notion of the people there really kind of taking charge of the institution. Boise music scene, Idaho's music scene, quietly influential. Can we make that argument? Yes.
Oh, oh my God. Yeah, I think so. I think absolutely. I mean, if we can even just, the two that popped to mind, obviously Built to Spill,
Right.
Youth Lagoon.
Right. Our buddy Trevor out there.
I know. And, Doug Marsh holding it down for decades.
Right.
And,
I mean, Eileen Jewell's a big Idaho gem.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And there's so many. And then there's so many up and coming and emerging artists that, to be honest, like, oh my gosh, you're in a different generation than I am, and I need to keep up with it better, and really pay attention to who's coming up. But it does seem like it's in no way slowing down. It's just getting better and better, and now there's more venues and more options of places to perform and test things out, and it's exciting.
Absolutely, and I always kind of feel like you can't really have a scene, a quote-unquote scene, without a sense of history, right? Like
Totally.
For whatever reason, we seem to remember a lot about the indie music scene in New York in the 2000s because everybody wrote about it.
Yep.
And so, I mean, it'd be nice to be able to, in 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now, just have an understanding and an accounting of the people who came from here, who moved through here, who took in the inspirations from the place and helped each other and learned from each other and influenced each other's music. That's really, a wonderful thing to get down on paper or, I don't know, a website, whatever we use to read things in the future or consume things in the future. So I'm very happy about this.
Very happy. I do think about just a side note, Pitchfork, RIP. And I think about, music journalism as a thing that's just changing so much and is kind of scary to think about it because I'm an oldie who, read Pitchfork, right? Clearly, it's all over. And I just wonder, thinking about a project like this and what it can do to fill in the gaps a little bit when this isn't a focus of journalism right now, unfortunately, or it's not a moneymaker, sadly, and so much of it is driven by that, and so. Anyway, it's cool that they're doing this.
I mean, that's such a good point. I mean, cultural journalism, criticism in particular, cultural journalism more broadly, it's on a little bit on the ropes, right? We're going through, nationally, internationally, this decimation of media businesses, and which really means the decimation of historical preservation in to some senses. And listen, my day job, I'm a critic in my day job, and
this is your thing.
We're a dying species, honestly. And so to see this coming out of BSU, essentially, a university, right? Something, an institution that should transcend market incentives, being a part of this project and backing this project. It's really important, and it's a wonderful thing that this is happening. So I just want to flag that, there is a call to action associated with this initiative. I'm reading here that sort of musicians based in Idaho or with ties to the state, Greater Treasure Valley, et cetera, they're encouraged to submit their music to this project. It can be a digital file, it can be an analog file or analog recording. The thing about historical preservation projects is that you need to get the pieces of history. So if you are a musician, or if you know a musician who's connected to Boise, Idaho, you should check this project out. I think everybody needs to be a part of this, I think.
Yeah, we'll put a link with the info on how to get in touch in the show notes.
Awesome. Well, Frankie, thanks so much for taking the time to walk me through the week, this very strange and hot, now rainy week.
Yeah. Enjoy. I guess don't wear your bikini out this weekend. But yeah, thanks, Nick. This was great.
Yeah, I'll keep my bikini in the closet. Yeah. That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. The show was produced by Evelyn Avitia, Frankie Barnhill, Dylan Brogan, and Granta Irving, and me, Nick Kwok. Blake Hunter writes our Hey Boise newsletter, and our music is by Up Is It Down Is The. We'll be back Monday with more stories from around the city. See ya.